Judas Priest finally did it. This year, Judas Priest's debut album, Rocka Rolla, celebrated its 50th birthday. And after 50 long years, Judas Priest were finally able to give their loyal fans what they've been asking for all this time, and something that the band themselves have been meaning to do since 1974. Their classic album in the way it was always supposed to sound like. So in this video, let's take a look at the history behind the Judas Priest and Rocka Rolla drama and understand why everyone is freaking out about this release. Compare the different versions of Rocka Rolla to see whether it was worth all that hype, and then see what this release may mean for the future of the band. Here you go. By the way guys, as always, please do not hesitate to comment on anything you hear or see in this video, and especially if you disagree with me, because the whole point of our Defenders of the Faith series is of course to start a conversation. But alright, let's do it. For those who are not too familiar with the drama, back in 1974, Judas Priest got signed to their first label, Gull Records, and it is with Gull Records with whom Judas Priest released their debut album, Rocka Rolla, and its follow-up, Sad Wings of Destiny. And while Sad Wings of Destiny was, in all honesty, a huge step up for the band, since they first heard the final version of the album, Judas Priest were always very frustrated with the way Rocka Rolla turned out to sound like, and all because of a rather low budget the Gull Records had for that record, and the whole fact that back then Gull Records were trying to market Judas Priest as a mainstream band, resulting in their debut album sounding nothing like what Judas Priest intended it to be. If we take a look at the early recordings from the early 70s of the same songs which eventually made it to Rocka Rolla, we can hear that the studio version of their debut album has lost absolutely all of its initial darkness and aggression. In fact, I would argue that the studio version of Rocka Rolla, released in 1974, sounded nothing like what Judas Priest actually played those songs live back then. And even more, the band got so frustrated with the final mix of Rocka Rolla that by the time that they finally recorded their sophomore studio album, Sad Wings of Destiny, Rob Halford would famously go up on stage and proclaim to all of their fans that they should burn all their copies of Rocka Rolla, because soon they will finally be able to hear the way Judas Priest actually should sound like on the record. And if we're being very honest, well, Sad Wings of Destiny was in fact a huge step up for the band. And after Judas Priest got signed to their first major label, CBS Records, the band approached Gull Records to purchase the rights for their first 2 albums. And in fact, they've been doing that for almost 50 years since then. Yet Gull Records of course declined the offer, since they did understand that Judas Priest is one of those bands they can make quite a lot of money from, even while not actually having them on the roster. And of course, since then, Gull Records have released gazillion different remixes and remasters of their first 2 albums, most of which did not really bring much new to the table. In fact, there were so many of them that Judas Priest actually encouraged all their fans to never purchase those. Because A, well, Judas Priest were barely making any money out of those. B, most of those remasters were just nominal and were actually a fancy word for repackaging. And C, well, even when those remasters did bring something new to the table, as in all honesty some of them did improve the sound significantly, well, Judas Priest never actually took part in it. And so none of those actually sounded like what Judas Priest intended it to sound like. But in 2022, while Judas Priest were actually on the road celebrating their 50 heavy metal years, Gull Records finally gave up and approached Michael Closer from Reach Music Publishing, who's been working with Glenn Tipton for quite a long time now, and have finally sold the rights to both Rocka Rolla and Sad Wings of Destiny.
Yes! Hell yeah! Hey, come on, baby! Come on! Yes! Come on! Ah!
resulting in Judas Priest obtaining the master tapes for both of those records, which this year they've partnered with nobody else but the legendary Tom Allom. Yes, the same Tom Allom who's been working with Judas Priest on Screaming for Vengeance, Defenders of the Faith, and gazillion other albums, to do a complete remix and remaster of Rocka Rolla, which resulted in the version released this Friday. For now, unfortunately, officially only in the United States and Canada, but which will soon be available for all of the heavy metal maniacs around the globe. As mentioned before, most of the Rocka Rolla reissues Gold Records have released throughout the years did not bring much new to the fans, except for the visual elements and a couple of perks here and there. And so, starting with the first reissues in the United States, Rocka Rolla has gotten a new cover artwork, which many believed was due to the risk of being sued by Coca-Cola, but in reality simply because Gold Records wanted to update the cover to better fit the metal aesthetics of the time and thus sell more copies of the reissue. And they've done it again later on with the Hero compilation, but if we're being very honest, one of the only really great things about those reissues was the original version of Diamonds and Rust, Judas Priest recorded back in 1974, yet decided to not include on the album. But other than that, most of those remasters did not do much, with the only exception of the 1981 remix done by Roger Bain, yet which, in all honesty, still did not improve the sound the way all the fans and the band themselves hoped for. And this is exactly the reason why so many fans have been freaking out about the 2024 remix of Rocka Rolla, as unlike all the other ones, it actually did change the album quite a lot. And the coolest thing here is that this new remix for some reason actually feels more true to the way we can hear those tracks on some of the early 1974 demos, and I guess to the way Judas Priest performed those songs live in the 1970s, than any other release before that. By the way guys, if you are planning to attend a Judas Priest concert, or any other metal concert for that matter, and you would like to rock some Metal Pilgrim merch and support the show and our Defenders of the Faith series, then just know that you can order to pretty much anywhere around the world at metalpilgrim.net. And just in case if you guys do decide to do that, I'd like to say thank you, because it actually does help out a lot. Now, in all honesty, I actually don't think there is much point in discussing my feelings about this remix, because, I mean, it really is a matter of taste. I'm more than sure that most metalheads will absolutely love it, yet there will definitely be some who are too used to the original bad sound of Rocka Rolla, and they will absolutely not accept this remix whatsoever. Yet, I just want to point out that, in my opinion, this is exactly what I personally expected from it. It is a remix which has given this record much more power and vigor and made it significantly crunchier and given it a much more metal sound, that classic dark and gloomy metal sound of the mid-70s, which at least to me perfectly fits this record and is very vivid in the opus of Winter, Deep Freeze and Winter Retreat, which, by the way, this time Gold Records did not have an opportunity to mess around with, and thus it was actually cut into 3 pieces the way Judas Priest wanted to. So yeah, at least so far I actually did enjoy this release quite a lot, and I'm actually really looking forward to November 15th when Judas Priest will finally drop the CD and vinyl version of Rocka Rolla 50th anniversary to be included into my personal Rocka Rolla collection. And so the only question remains at this point, no, not like that, the only two questions remaining at this point is A, whether we'll ever finally get to hear a studio version of Mother Son, the rare song Judas Priest have pretty much always performed in the early and mid-70s, and which the fans have been begging the band to record for almost 50 years now, and B, when we'll finally get an announcement of the similar release for Sad Wings of Destiny. Most Judas Priest fans know that the original version of Rocka Rolla had the songs Winter, Deep Freeze, Winter Retreat, and Cheater as a one-track suite, referred to by many fans as Winter Suite, and which has later been divided into 4 different songs. But the interesting thing is that the track Cheater was actually not supposed to be a part of it, and instead a rare song Mother Son would have fitted much better. Yet back in 1974, Judas Priest decided to not include Mother Son on their debut album, although continued performing it live.
Calling in her shining sound, she said she's desperately for me.
By the way, I'll make sure to post a link to this super rare bootleg recording of Mother Son on my Patreon page, so check it out afterwards if you'd like to. But anyways, according to the journalist Gary Sharp Young, Judas Priest had a chance to record this song in the studio, yet both Rob Halford and the band's manager Jane Andrews said in 2003 that the band never recorded it, so if they do ever decide to release it, they will have to record it first. And I don't know about you, but I think it would simply be incredible if we get to hear the studio version of this track, even if it comes 50 years later. Anyways, what do you guys personally think about this Rocka Rolla reissue? Because the thing is that I'm actually really happy with it. I mean, it is a big deal, unlike most other reissues and remasters and remixes that have been released these days. Because in my opinion, this release actually does bring Rocka Rolla to light in an absolutely new sound, with a production and feel somewhat similar to what Judas Priest have been doing in the early 80s together with Tom Allen. And although I think that Sad Wings of Destiny is incredible and is actually one of my absolute favorite Judas Priest albums, I'd be really excited to see what Tom Allen would be able to do with that record as well. And what about you? As always, thank you so much for watching this video, guys, and more than anything, thank you so much for supporting me, this show, and Ukraine through this very difficult time. We will prevail. Slava Ukraini!